Hi, folks. I guess we're on now. This is Ask the Master, and by John Watson. I'm International Master John Watson, and the main idea of this show, as most of you know, is to discuss chess questions. You can ask me questions. That's the basic idea about chess and the chess world. Please remember that you can ask me currently, and there we go with some feedback. The usual typical thing. Let me get rid of that. Hang on. I'm almost there. Perfect. Yes, so you can ask me questions either on the chat on your right there. We're already talking on the right. I'm glad to get to know some of you a little bit. And you can also ask me in advance by email is the best way. Ask imwatson@chessclub.com. That's ASKIMWATSON at chessclub.com, which is the ICC email server. And you can also send a message to John L. Watson. That's JOHNLWATSON, and that's my ICC. So you have to message that. You message space John L. Watson if you're an ICC member, and you can ask, as I say, live right now on the chat channel on your right. So ask about anything related to chess. A few areas I have expertise on is chess openings, which we talk a lot about, and chess strategy, chess books and videos, and really we're open to anything. We can talk about literature, movies, whatever. So let's get started. I guess you noticed today we were an hour late with the show. We waited an hour. Hopefully everybody saw that announcement before you got on today. And we also had a slight delay, which we've just been chatting about, but we're there now. So let me see. Before getting to the questions that I've been sent or even the chat, hello everybody, let me say that first of all, the new indices of openings are up on Facebook. As a part of the request, I put them in reverse order. I cut and paste them all backwards, so now the most recent shows are first. And those you can also find those listed under every YouTube show. We may be missing one. But the Facebook list is John L. Watson. That's my Facebook page, one of them. John space L space Watson. That's 3 words. And it's on, I think, what's called my timeline. I'm not a big Facebook person, but if you get on there and you see my wall or whatever one of those things is, then just click on my face and you get to the other screen and you'll see that list. Okay, so as usual, before getting, people can see. John Steinbeck books, yeah, absolutely. I love it. Which one, though? I always think that Winter of Our Discontent is underrated because he's so famous for the cannery row and tortilla flats. That's that period. But I think Winter of Our Discontent is absolutely brilliant. So let me see. Okay, let me talk about some things like I always do before I get any questions or get to the chat. Let me talk about things either from last time or ones that I got recently. Here's one. Here's something that I think would be good to start with. It's a question about the Taimanov because I didn't really describe it very well. Let's see if that's it. There we go. Okay, we talked about the Taimanov Sicilian and I gave a sort of confused line. Yeah, we talked about this order. Someone was asking about this as being a possible problem with the Taimanov to establish this, what we were calling a Maroczy bind. And I was saying, well, this is pretty easy to play against. And I wanted to show you the order that I was trying to give last time. I should know this. I used to play it. But basically it amounts to this. You'll have to go back there to see the discussion. But it amounts to this position as being the basic position. And I think I did get this far. And then I got this far. And maybe even talked about this move. I'm not sure if I talked about that move. But let me just say that one thing that people do sometimes, first of all, is anticipating queen b3 by playing this move. The idea is that if queen b3, you bring this knight back here. And I think what I mentioned last time is this idea for black of playing knight back and back. And it's more common, for example, in this position, to play the knight here in order to meet this move with knight back. And then if there's a knight coming out to hit this square for the 3rd time, you can just move over and protect it. So I just wanted to make that clear. This game was another common order, which was that way. And now the usual idea is knight c5 at some point, especially, for example, if he played to attack right now. You're going to want to block things off. You've also got rook b8 ideas. So he plays knight c5. That stops any idea of knight a4 being good. And white comes back. And in this position, I think Karpov played queen d2. There are a lot of games, a lot of games from this kind of position, even this exact position. Bishop f1 is a common move in this position instead of knight back, but here he wants to reroute the knight and maybe prepare for b4, maybe with a3, for example. And black plays. I'm not really analyzing this. I'm just kind of giving you a general feel for what some of the play goes like. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, now you could even take here. Was it at this point? Yeah, you could even have taken this move, but it gets very messy and complicated. It involves giving up some material, but black, well, I can show you right away what the very beginning of what happens is this, and you're attacking here as well as still attacking here. Black can probably equalize with that, actually, but it's a little risky. So instead of that, black simply goes back. White protects his center. And I just thought I'd stop there. So that's a typical sort of sequence in the Taimanov, just to make clear. And black is considered perfectly okay here. It's very solid. This is called a hedgehog position, as you probably all know. And it's quite solid for black. On the other hand, white's happy too. White can also attack in positions like this. He can't really get rid of this knight yet because of the knight coming here to b3. So he has to kind of reorganize. And black always has ideas of simply playing for, well, sometimes he even plays for f5. That can happen, usually when the rook's here. And there's bishop f6, there's queen a8, and there's trying to get d5 in. That's always a theme, that d5 becomes a perpetual sort of idea. It's hard for white to make progress, but it's a very, very interesting game and has led to a lot of interesting play. Okay, so let me, having said that, begin the link in the Facebook with a page with a stream video description. Yeah, sure, I can do that. I think I tried to link to one of them, but I will do that. That's a good idea. Okay, so that comes from last week. I just wanted to mention that because I think I didn't give a very good order for why this was okay for black and how he might reorganize. Also, speaking of the Taimanov, I've been asked actually several times now what to do about it, that and the con. And I noticed that in the Dangerous Weapons of Sicilian, John M. what people want is a fairly simple line, but mainly an irregular line where you don't have to get involved in all kinds of crazy complications, or at least where you can do something that isn't that well known and won't involve a tremendous amount of memorization. So this game, let me show you this game between Rudd and Ems, shows one system for white that you think you might be interested in. I looked this over a little, and it seems to be doing pretty well. It's reasonable, at least. Okay, now we talked about queen c7 here as being sort of the old main line of the Taimanov. That's the way I used to play it. But there's transpositions. This would be a sort of a Skehevaningen structure, that kind of thing, where you don't move the queen out, and you at least delay this move. You might even get some other openings out of that. But anyway, the kind of a lot of people in modern times are playing this order because they're trying to save the queen move, and that's because of systems with g3 are easier to meet. So white plays this, and black plays here in the center, and now we get this funny move here. This is the idea, and I think this is worth thinking about. You can play this also against queen c7 first. And so e5 is obviously an idea, maybe not an immediate threat, but I think this is worth looking at. Because what you're doing here is instead of playing, well, you're probably all used to these ideas, these queen d2 and f3 and possibly castling g4, sort of an English attack against the Taimanov. But this sort of changes the structure, and people don't really know about this as much either, I think, as black, or they're not as used to it. So black plays there and just stops e5. If he plays the most natural move that I would have played in the old days, thinking, oh, white's center is too loose now, white simply develops, and black, and now the point is you are ready to just castle and play here. So black needs to find a plan, and the most obvious plan is to go here and break in the center because you've got that pinned. The reason that some slow Sicilian moves like these don't work sometimes is because black can break in the center. Well, if black breaks in the center here, then really he doesn't get that great a position. This was played in the game, knight takes, but you could also play here. And I think it's pretty easy for white to play this, actually. Just go all the way into an ending. You don't want to take here because he's going to take with check and then castle with check and then take the pawn. So he's going to have to take here first and then take back. But you can see that there's a lot of looseness over there. So this is going to be a very easy plan to play. Oh, excuse me. Let's not do that. Let's play. He takes this also, weakens there, and then takes that. Sorry about that move order. Should have played bishop takes c3 check right after knight c6 for the record. Wait a minute. Hang on. Let me go back. Confusing myself here. So bishop e4, knight c6. Oh, take this first. Thank you. Okay. Is that right? Yeah. And take back here, and now so that the king can cover a few more squares, I guess, is the idea for black. But white plays just here. And this is very awkward because this is a very bad bishop. That's a really effective bishop on all these squares, and it's going to be hard to hold this. I'm not sure if it's a forced win, but it's just difficult. So that's why you don't want to do that. Okay, so instead of that, he just defends. The other possibility, let me see, after... Yeah, I can show you a few other lines, but we're not going to spend all day on this stuff. So let me just show you what the main line is, what happened in this game. Here's the idea. The idea is of f4 and queen f3 and bishop e3 is to play queen f3, which is kind of a unique idea in these positions. You don't usually get this. This is typical of other Sicilians. And the next idea is, if you can, get g4, g5 in, which is a very common sort of plan. And I think this is very hard to play against. It's also fun for white. Let me just show you what happens in this game. It develops. I think white just castles. And black plays there, and now g4. Here we go. So that seems to give up something. You could play this first, but that's a little slower, trying to get g4. And so what he does is he allows a tactic, which is this move. Now you don't really want to you don't want to castle into an attack here. This kind of thing is very awkward. Let me just see if I can give you a concrete line. Oh, here's something to know, just because it's so typical. This is a trick worth knowing that a lot of you probably already know, but some people don't know. It's a little slow to try to attack this way when black's attacking on the queen side. So the idea is you play here first. Now, he can't take that way because that's hanging, so he takes here, and then you crack it open. And you can even crack open the file this way if need be. So white gets a really big attack, and this is just tough. This is not worth trying. So just thought I'd mention that. So this whole idea of allowing g5 is pretty tough. So what seems to be wrong with this position is this move, and then there, and guess what? You're on that, which also wins a rook, and you're on the bishop. So at first sight that looks pretty convincing, but unfortunately white can take that, and now if black takes here, you go here, and now there's trouble because this is attacked. If he takes, you take back, and you can take this. So the obvious question is, what do you do? Well, let me just look at. Let me look at first. Yeah, I guess he has to take back, doesn't he? Otherwise, he's just losing material. Okay, so he takes back first, protects this bishop here, and then I think we're getting in trouble here. Rook g1 looks like a good move. I think that's the idea. Yeah, rook g1, and the idea is that if he takes here, now we blast through over here. And if he plays anything else, you're going to take here, unless he plays here, and of course that allows this kind of thing. And if you add it up after all this, white's going to be very happy here. I guess bishop f8 is the only try, and then we go here. And white's just getting a monstrous amount of material here. So this is really not an acceptable position. Okay, so anyway, back to the game. Black just simply takes back, and white makes us another move that you should know about, which is just this simple move, pinning that. And that's also very awkward, and white's going to be better here, regardless of what happens here. So, and you can check that out. It's sort of a standard position. The knight would love to go back and protect that, but then you have knight d5 ideas. So this whole position is just too awkward. Okay, that's if that's if he wins if he tries to win the pawn. But otherwise, we go back a bit, and otherwise this move's just very hard to meet. And I think white's just better already in this position. And you can go check that out. But that's kind of the idea of f4. Now, obviously, that's not forced at all, but it just gives you a good start for what you might want to do. Okay, now let me see. We have. See what I was going to do next here. Steiner asked something. I'm a French defense player, and lately I've been drawn towards the Rubinstein. By the way, this is not something from an earlier show, but I'll get back to some of those from the last few weeks. But first, I thought I'd do something new. I've been lately drawn towards the Rubinstein variation if white tries to go for the classical knight c3 of the Tarrasch, knight d2. Let me put this up here for a second. Percentage 296. All right, and so what's he talking about? He's talking about the French Tarrasch. Let me show everybody that. The question is whether playing against this and this. And he's saying that instead of studying tons of theory on all this stuff, he has the idea of playing the Rubinstein. He says most of his games go like this. It doesn't matter if you're going to take that pawn, where the knight went to. And then here, this is called the Rubinstein variation, where you play for this knight out here just to challenge the center. And he says that most games go like this. I said, let's see if this game went like that. Oh, I have to go back. It was probably a knight d2 game. Yeah. Okay. And most games go like that. That's what he says. And I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts about this specific line. Do you think the Rubinstein is a decent choice of opening for me? Or should I try to find some lines that might be a bit more challenging for white? I'm rated 1400 to 1600. I think this is a fine opening. This is a very good way to get into the French, and it's not even very typical of French themes, but it doesn't really matter. It's another opening, and it's very instructive and interesting to play. And I also think it's pretty sound. I think you should get Hans Langrock's book, which is from Russell Enterprises. It's the best book I've seen on the Rubinstein by a landslide, and it's pretty recent. It's about, I think, a year old. I wrote the foreword for it. And while I was writing the foreword, I was looking at the line. I read pretty much the whole book. And was very impressed. I think it's a good practical weapon. It's not as exciting as the other lines, but it's maybe a good way to start. And let's just look at this game. I got out one sample game just to show what some of Black's ideas are. Okay, here we go. Let me see. Did I annotate this game? I think I did. This is a game by George Meyer as Black. He's one of the big players of the Rubinstein as Black, and played it against, he's somewhere around 26 something, and Georg Meyer, excuse me, and he's beaten and drawn some extremely good players with this, top GMs, so he knows what he's doing. Now that's the usual theme of the Rubinstein. Just to talk about the Rubinstein for a second, the theme is to get c5 in. So even going back here, you want to protect that. If you played a slow move immediately, let me do something like if you play this immediately, you have the problem that the queen has to come out, and white is going to maybe gain a tempo with this move, or else gain a lot of time if you try to stop that move. So that's kind of the reasoning behind it. This is a very valuable move. After all, white's knight has moved twice. Why not get rid of it? But the idea is to prepare that move. Just talking about a few of the general ideas of the Rubinstein here. Okay, and now this piece is attacked, so you either have to defend it and you have to lose time, or maybe go back. I think Tal used to play that, but most people will go ahead and take this because they aren't losing any time. And in the old days, some people used to play. There's a lot of moves here. Bishop d3 is obviously very normal. Bishop c4 has been played. Bishop e3, I think, was played by quite a few people for a while. It's one of the main lines. They're all in the book, and it would be fun to look at all that. In this game, he just plays c3, a slow move. Very popular move for quite a while. I think Kasparov may have played it. And white goes here, and that opens up this diagonal a little bit, and that's why white makes his next move, which is a little funny looking, because it wastes time. It's an extra move, but look at that. That's kind of a nice move to make, and maybe even queen a4 too. So it's a bit of a tactical line, but Black knows what he's doing. He's okay here. He stops bishop b5 check first. White checks anyway, because after all, after b5, there's bishop takes b5, because the pawn's pinned. The pawn on a6 is pinned. So Black simply retreats, and white plays the most typical sequence, which is to capture there. That opens up the d file, so that might help in some lines. Black recaptures, and white plays out. And now this position was doing pretty well for white for quite a while because he's getting his pieces out really quickly, even though the pawn structure is fine for black. And then Meyer came up with this move, which is kind of a clever little move. Notice that the rook is protected on this square. In other words, if he played b5 right now, there'd be this problem of just getting taken, and he couldn't take back because of queen takes. But with the rook on a7, b5 becomes a threat because the rook is protected by the bishop. So white pins that knight. Black goes ahead with his b5 plan. The thing is, if he plays the queen to a more natural square like this, then we've got some nice little counterattack here. It's hitting that indirectly, it's hitting this directly, and it's hitting this directly. So that equalizes very easily. So white has to play this way, but that gives black another tempo. And you can imagine that now with all these tempi, black is probably okay. Makes a nice move here, sort of coordinating here, because after all, that knight is pinned. So white goes, that's a good move too, trying to force black to in some sort of concessions on the king side, and it also gets out of the way of this bishop, which can now come out. So black plays, I don't know if these are best moves at this point, but I think they're fine. It comes back, the knight was threatened, he doesn't want to simplify. And black attacks, which is a nice idea. Get some initiative going. And now maybe white should play queen here, although black's okay then, because this allowed a clever little trick here, this check. The idea is if the knight takes, you want a whole pawn. And so the king takes, but then very simply that. And black is getting the piece back, and temporarily he's threatening to get it back with an extra pawn, so white has to do something about that. The key here, we'll go a couple more moves and you'll see what the key is here. White decides that he's just going to go ahead and take queens off. And black could simply play a clever move like this, for example, which threatens to take, and if queen takes, then there's a fork. And he has an endgame advantage, as you'll see in a second. Instead, he does the same idea with that. He figures the queens are going to come off anyway, so he takes the open file. White defends this so he can move his queen. This beautiful bishop here. What's basically going on here now is that now there's the idea of rook f5, so white takes the queens off. What's basically going on now is that the pawn structures are maybe fairly even, but black's more active. These pieces aren't doing anything. This knight's very nice. It has squares like that to go to. The rook's active on the open file, and the bishop is a beautiful piece. So black's pieces are just better. It's not much, but it's something. It's a little hard to play against. So white develops, that's natural. And black, it turns out, probably could play there. It's probably the most accurate move, but he also ties down white a little bit on the king side. And that's just a big mistake, as you might imagine, because it creates a huge hole there. I think he was having trouble with this line. Didn't like that line because of check. And then you pretty much have to give it up. And then you've got bishop versus knight. Black's got bishop versus knight. We talked about that in endgames. It's amazing how often a bishop will beat a knight as long as there are pawns on both sides of the board. So even though I'm sure this is not a winning position yet, it's something you don't want as white. But maybe he should have settled for that anyway, because this creates a big weakness. And black immediately puts another piece attacking that weakness. And, well, this is just an advantage for black. So at this point, black probably should have played rook d7, by the way. But let me just go back here for a second. Oh yeah, you might wonder why not the very simple move bishop f3, but then you have this problem. Knight takes hitting the rook, and then bishop takes, there'll be a pin on this pawn. So that's the trick that black's kind of basing his play on. So this may be worth just glancing at, just because it's interesting to see why this whole position favors black, and how he slowly but surely gains space. Obviously, this is not all forced, but it just kind of shows you that when you have more space and you have this nice, you've got that extra center pawn. Maybe that's the point I really should have emphasized. Extra center pawns can be very valuable, even in the endgame. And now those pawns start moving pretty soon. I'm not sure when, but pretty soon. I keep waiting for f5. There we go. So that's going to be very dangerous. The king's kind of stuck. You can see everything's a little bit awkward here. If the bishop moves, there's a rook takes followed by rook takes check. So that's a problem. And so now maybe he's thinking about a3 followed by rook b2. Just black's much more active and has those nice pawns. White tries to use his only assets. And I don't know if this is all forced, but I think you'll find that in general this is very, very good for black, because white's so tied down. So eventually black actually just wins material. And maybe we don't have to go further than that, but black won this game very, very shortly, as you can imagine. All right, so there's a Rubinstein game. I just picked that because I thought it was kind of typical of the ideas, and that opening in particular, the break with c5, you should know about, because it happens in almost every variation. It's sort of the basic point of the Rubinstein is that you're going to play this move c5 to attack the center. Okay, so let's okay, NC theory of the classical. Yeah. So you can definitely play d takes e. It's a little harder to win. It's a little more passive, but it's definitely worth trying. Okay, more chat listeners here. Let me just keep moving because there's a bunch of older questions, and I really should get to some of them. Sometimes I've been asked a question 2 or 3 times, and one of those is about the 150 attack versus the Pirc, which can be very useful as a repertoire weapon for white, and black should certainly know what to do about it because it's so popular. So I thought I'd show one game with that, and maybe also talk about the ideas maybe in a separate game, show you what some of the main lines are. But first, I just thought I'd show you a typical game, or sort of typical game, and let me do that. Okay, now the Pirc order here would be to play here and then this, and so that would be the normal order. Okay, just keep this in mind. That's your anti-Pirc order. In this game, it went a little bit differently. It went like that first, and white committed to this move first. But he still plays a 150 attack, so that's interesting. Now the 150 attack is often, it's bishop e3, but it's often without knight f3 in, so that often you're going to play f3 or h3, and I'll talk about that in a second, but first I'm going to just show you a game. One of the big ideas of the 150 attack is to play an absolutely elementary sack, mate kind of position. And you'll see that. So that's what he tries for. And black tries to attack. And I showed this game partly because I think it's a pretty good system for black to try and do this. Let me show you some other moves to give you some idea of what's going on. This move doesn't seem to be particularly effective, but you can try it. The point is that you're just going to kick that knight back again. The one independent line possibly is to play that move. That's kind of a cute idea, and that you can try and then play for the movement either bishop h6 or e5. But I'm not going to really go into that. But it's a good question. Why not just play knight g4? And it's certainly not unplayable. And this is we'll see that by transposition later, I think. And if not, it's just a typical 150 attack. So, but I like these a6 ideas, a6 with b5. They really make sense, especially when the knight's here. And I think this game kind of has a nice balance between attack and defense. Let me also show you e5, because e5 is very instructive. That move is very instructive. And there's really a couple ways to play this, but let's just play sort of normally, which would be castles. And then here. And now, for example, white can go for the attack like this. Just play like that. Then in this game he plays here so he can get h5 in without the knight being able to take it. And black gets his pieces out really quickly and stops h5, but then black plays h5 anyway, so it's kind of cute. It's kind of a cute line. If knight here, then this is really a problem. There's just too much attack on the file, and if he takes that way, there's a bishop c4 check, and that's just going to end up killing. Just for example, a cute move now would be, I think, queen takes. Is that right? Yeah, it does seem to work, doesn't it? That's kind of cool. So, yeah, you'll at least win some material that way for sure. So, in order to not allow something like that to happen, black can simply take that. That's the natural way to do it. And now, even though this wasn't played in the game, I think that's quite strong. And the reason I wanted to show you this long line is just to show you some attacking chances for white, but also a theme that just you can't see enough of. Knights in front of the king on an outpost that's unassailable because there's no light squared bishop, and those knights are worth at least a rook. I could give you some lines here. I actually looked at some lines here, but we don't want to take the whole show doing this. But this is a huge attack. Let me just show you maybe a simple way to do this. Maybe here, and then he has to bring the knight back there. That's the best defense, I think. And but you just keep bringing your pieces towards the king. Now you're threatening this bishop h6 idea in a lot of positions. For example, if he attacks that, you just go here, and the game is actually over because he has to take it, and then you've got this guy coming in too. And that's just too much. So b5 is a mistake, but on the other hand, well, and then you've got more attack coming too. I think king h8 was the one I looked at. Let me see, bishop c4. Is that right? Okay, you'll have to forgive me here because I'm not quite sure what the... I think I've got slightly the wrong position. But anyway, you can see that white's attack is just enormous here. Good always to know about that f5 square. It's just worth a fortune if you can get that going. Okay, what does that have to do with the this particular line? Not all that much, does it? So in the game, which I'm having trouble getting back to, why is that? I'm having trouble reverting to it. There we go. In the game, we have this attempt to just play for b5. And you can always just play a normal move here, like bishop d3, for example. That's a natural move. And then what black does in a case like that is play a real simple move like that. Black can sort of take aim at that square and cover that square. And let me see, what would be a good thing? Maybe actually, let's play this first. Let's just play the natural move there. And here, this is a pretty good line for white, actually, I think. A pretty reasonable line. Maybe like that, and now I think knight c6 is the right move again. He played bishop b7, and he got got in terrible trouble because, let me see what happened next. Knight up, and this is following, and black really didn't have any way of meeting that successfully. So there you go. Now that's a perfect example of what the 150 attack is, basically. It's just going for the throat, basically. Black didn't play that very well. Although it wasn't that bad until the very end. He could have still played better, but still. Okay, so in this game we had just bishop there immediately, and the threat is to go here and maybe castle queenside. And black went ahead and counterattacked, and white played there, and now black plays an interesting move to control that side of the board. The problem is if he plays a move like this, then this e5 move starts getting strong. Another big 150 attack theme. By the way, you can see why everybody plays this. It's hard to get an attack against the Pirc defense, and it's hard to get your pieces out quickly. And this position is actually already very tough. Maybe even close to lost. Here's one game, went like this, and trying to counterattack. Here and here, and now this game was agreed drawn. He's a very strong player as black, and he offered to draw, and the lower player took the draw because that move was so strong and so difficult to meet. I would say this is a completely winning position, actually. So that's what you're going for in the 150. And for whoever asked about it, I think we got a couple people asking about this, and I think oh no, the Urasov, I didn't prepare that. I will look at that. Well, I'll try to get that. It's on my list of things still to come, and my apologies that I haven't gotten to it yet. Looking over at the chat now. So anyway, in this game, he moved there first. That's a more accurate move. And this happened with a direct attack. Probably not a good idea. That was a pawn sacrifice. But black's probably fairly reasonably well off here. White has a bunch of moves like, I'm not going to go into this completely. Castling queenside, knight d5. Knight d5 is an idea to pull away the defender from the king's side. a4 is a move, maybe even be the best move, actually. d5 is a possible move. But black just plays knight e5, and actually it's a fairly solid center. It's probably about equal. There was one game, maybe I should show you that one. This looks good for white at first, but actually black has a pretty nice center, and that bishop's not a very good bishop. So white tries to break up the queen side, and let's just look at that really quickly, and bring his knight to the center, and black breaks up the center. So it's all very thematic. White defends, and that knight will be pinned if he takes. So I assume he doesn't, and he doesn't. He plays bishop there, bishop here. And now a key move, not just a key move, but a key idea, which is to put the knight on the blockade square. And there you go. There's your Nimzowitsch concept. This is kind of a bad bishop. This is a fairly good pawn, but not overwhelming. It's well blockaded, and black has these pawns. Now white's fine too. White's got space and plenty of ideas, but I think black's certainly equalized. Okay, back to the game. white tries to break through immediately, probably a mistake. He's trying to give up a pawn for attack, which is very typical in a 150 attack. The problem is that white really can't defend like that, and I don't know if you see why offhand, but there's a little trick, which is here. And this guy's pinned. And so black's winning the piece back with a pawn. He's also winning a center pawn, unless white plays like that, defending the queen. But remember, he was a pawn up to begin with. So now here, attacking the queen, takes, and now this is hanging. Knight here is an issue. These pawns are very, very mobile. It's just not a fun position to be in. It's you'd have to look at it a little while, but this is good for black. It's just black would be very happy to have this position. It's not overwhelmingly good, but it's not something you'd be thrilled with. So instead of that, white decides to sacrifice the pawn. That was his idea. And instead of taking, which is a little risky, because white's going to take, play here, get the rook attacking this way, bishop b4 is an idea. So black plays this move first, and that sort of ruins everything. Because now if he goes here, you've got queen up, attacking this for the third time and attacking down here. So this shows you also how black might want to play against too early an attack. I think this is kind of an instructive game for several reasons. So he goes back that way instead, and black centralizes anyway. White plays up, and now he's aimed at the king, so it'd be pretty risky to start grabbing things like that. So black takes there instead. It looks kind of bold because white seems to be getting quite an attack here after that move. But it turns out to be sound. So white's got space, but black's consolidating. That move ends up not working very well, and I won't go into why that is. And I guess it turns out that if you really wanted to consolidate his advantage, you could just play here with a little extra pressure on the queen side. So take my word for that. You can go back and look at it again. But that's sort of a typical 150 attack. So let me talk a little bit more about the 150 generally. I don't want to take too much time here. Yeah, well, someone thinks the 150 attack is fun, so let me go ahead and show that again. We did get several questions about it. I think I got two fairly recently and one quite a long time ago. So let me just talk about the ideas, but maybe not spend as long as I wanted to doing that, because this could drag on. Okay, here we go. 150 attack. So here's something for you guys to play against the Pirc, is what it amounts to. Okay, that's a more common order. You still have this idea and this idea, which are very common in the 150 attack. So this is a more normal order. And so one of the ideas for white is simply to play queen d2, castles, bishop h6, and h4, h5. It's really that simple, which is why sometimes black doesn't move this bishop, because the bishop's going to come to h6 anyway, so he doesn't want to waste a time, want to waste a tempo exchanging it off. This move now, the one we saw last time, is probably a little bit slow because of this strange little counter, and you'll see what the point of that is. The point is to play f4 without allowing a knight to come there. And the other point is this move. You get this nice little, clever little move. And that's actually very hard to meet because there's this queen f3 idea coming. For example, let's say he tries to stop queen f3 by getting rid of these, then white's just too far developed and has too much extra space. Knight here, and how are you defending there? Well, you can try this, but what do I have here? Oh, just developing, okay. And if bishop here, oh, knight here, oh my god. Okay, so that one. There's just too much hanging. It's too easy for white to attack in this position. A6 is another idea, if for example, if he ends up taking here first. So this is a huge attack. And yeah, let me just show you maybe a little more. Let's just keep going with a regular move here. In this game, or in the main line I have him play here, the point is he's trying to save a move with that bishop, but let's take a quick look at that. You could play knight f3 there too, but this is probably more common. And yeah, actually, I don't have a line on this, but this is a typical idea to play castles and bishop h6 early. And one point that's worth making is if he tries to attack that and you go here, you can't really track down that bishop, and this knight just ends up losing time. It's one of the big ideas of the 150 attack of this. If you can play as early as possible without playing f3 or h3, it's actually even better. But okay, so that wasn't very well explained, but you'll bear with me. In this game, we have, let me go back here. In the game, he plays that move first. And this is kind of a new way to play h3 really, really early. And you could also play queen d2. It's absolutely normal. But here's the point. In this game, he plays this move, which is sort of the standard idea. Leave your bishop there and play for queenside expansion, threatening that. But it doesn't really work very well. So let me just show you the other idea, which is probably a little better, is to go here. And then white decides not to develop, just goes ahead and attacks. It's called the archbishop attack. And at first it looks ridiculous, but the idea is that you're going to be playing here. You bring the knight to g3, queen to d2, and f4, and then you're attacking on every part of the board with your pawns. And this has been really, really successful. It's not obvious at all that it should be, but it just turns out in practice this is done extremely well. Just for example, if black plays here, you stop this first. And if black really gets desperate and tries to stop f4, then you just develop, and it just turns out this is easy for white to play because you're going to play f4 anyway, like in this position. And you can look at this for a while. It's just it's hard for black. I think white's already better here. So that's kind of the idea with this h3 move. Okay, so moving ahead, he plays b5 right away, but that's worse. And it's good to know this trick because this is the old way for black to play. For years, black kind of played this way, but this exact order is great because there's no knight g4, and the queen is protected. So in a case where queens get exchanged, the rook comes in really quickly. And now nothing has really worked very well here. Black in this game plays here, natural move, and takes the queens. And black retreats, attacking the e-pawn, but white just defends it and has a big lead in space and development. He's got a lot of extra pieces out, and his pieces develop real easily. This game went like that. I don't know what g3 is about, but I guess bishop g2 right away rather than just knight f3. And, well, this is not good. I guess f6 was a little bit too ambitious. Probably missed this move, this knight d5 move. This very pretty move. And the idea now is that after takes, the rook's trapped. This rook is trapped. Can't go here because of this. And if he doesn't take, we've got mating threats, right? Knight d5 is actually a mating threat. So the only thing he can try, I guess, is this. But then knight b6, and black's winning material because if the rook comes up, you're taking, and you're on the rook. So anyway, 150 attacks. I could go on and on, but this I think we'll just stop there just to give you some ideas because we got a lot of other stuff. We have the Eurosoph, still asking about the Eurosoph, and we will get around to that. Sorry about that. We'll maybe next week, hopefully next week. I did look at it. I did look at that question, but there were so many others that we hadn't covered that I didn't do it. My apologies. Okay, so other chat questions so far. Let me make sure I don't miss any. Yeah, that Rubinstein book is really excellent. Langrock. It's by the Russell Enterprises put it out, so it's not always really simple to find those books. And okay, so I don't see any other questions, immediate questions right now. So let me go back to ones that I keep being asked about. Exchange French. Repertoire in the Exchange French. We're not going to do the whole thing because that would be impossible, but I already showed you something about that. And I think I will just continue with that. Let me go over here. So we'll kind of do this one by one because it's a complicated subject. Now the goal, remember, is to get an unsymmetrical position. So it isn't drawish. And that's fairly easy to do. And French players over the years have not had a lot of problem with the Exchange French, which is why it hasn't been very popular on the top levels. Okay, now we've already looked at yeah, let me just see. Now, what you can do for a book is you can use my book, Play the French 4, we mentioned that, and just use those lines. Those lines are all holding up. So if you want a book on the Exchange French from Black's point of view, that's a possibility. But let me just show you some things to look at. Now, in an earlier show, I see it says 15th of March. If you want to look at that show, I talked about going here. Now in my book, I talk about this a lot. And getting an imbalance that way by attacking here. And you already have an unbalanced position. Usually he's going to play here. So that's one way to do it. And then maybe you can even try to castle queenside, which is fun. But I also showed you this, and I believe I put some of this in the book too. This is easier for black to play. And I showed you the game Tatai Korchnoi, and I really suggest you go back there and take a look at it. A very famous game. That's, as I say, that's the March 15th show. And the idea is you're willing to take an isolated pawn because you have so much activity for your pieces, such good open lines. And I won't go into any more detail there, but it was it's a real pretty game, and you can go look at that. So that was my suggestion against bishop d3. So then there's a question about all these f4, c4 systems. Now you can play c4 right away, which is maybe very popular, and not a bad idea for a beginning player because it gets the pieces out really quickly. Usually, the bishop comes here pretty fast, and you can get these pieces out very smoothly. So it's actually a pretty decent system, but it's not really that threatening. There's plenty of good answers against it. And then maybe next time we'll take a look at knight here, and then whatever black does here, playing c4, or maybe even this time we'll look at it. I'm not sure. We'll see if we get to it. Or even if knight f6, you might play c4 too. So that's another c4 idea, but this particular order we'll look at first. And I'm going to show you that move. It's not the only move at all. In fact, in my book I also talk about this in pretty much great length. but let me just show you one idea. Now the first positional idea about this is that if white plays here, which looks pretty natural, then he's going to go into an isolated pawn position, but with these bishops exchanged, and that's never a good idea, or it's seldom a good idea. I guess you'd probably take this way. And sooner or later, you could do it even immediately, you can take this. This isolated pawn position, there's a set of minor pieces taken off, which is not good, but also that's a very key minor piece to keep on the board if you want to attack. The whole idea of getting the isolated pawn is to get attacking chances. White wants attacking chances here. He's going to have fewer of them because his bishop is off. That's maybe a little oversimplified, but you'll almost never see someone play bishop d2 for that reason, for that basic reason. So he plays knight c3, and black plays there. Now in my book I emphasize this line too. I actually played knight e7 for years, but I think this line's knight f6 is also good if you want to take a look at that. And by the way, I should show you that you can get, if you play knight f6 right away and then they play something like knight c3, you can transpose to that line. And if he plays knight f3 even, you can transpose to that line because you can play check. And once again, he really doesn't want to take those off when he's going to get an isolated pawn. So you get the same kind of position. So that's worth mentioning, that you can always get that kind of position. But in this case, you try something different. It puts the knight on e7 to support, for example, bishop f5 or knight f5, attacking the one weak pawn on the board, which is the d pawn. And white plays there. And let's see if there's anything worth kind of looking at. Let's look at something else. A very popular move now is this. So let me show you that. Black just castles or plays knight c6. That's often a good move. And you can play knight c6 now. So here white has the two bishops, but he's behind in development. Notice he hasn't gotten castle to move that bishop. And there's a little issue with these pawns. Now you might say, well, he can get rid of those pawns by playing here, but then these light squares get kind of weak. So just for example, this is not a particularly good one. The idea, by the way, is knight here to try and force taking, and bishop g4 is another idea to win light squares. So let me just show you a not very good line where white wastes time. White wastes move by playing bishop d3, and that's a little bit dangerous. Not that it's terrible, but it's really not what he wants. Black plays here. Now there's ideas of rook e8 check, and there's ideas of knight takes, and that's where the lead in development really helps. So white took here. You can check out other moves, but this doesn't work very well, but it's natural, I guess, in a way. Okay, now white doesn't even have his two bishops, and this square is very vulnerable. Now you're threatening bishop g4 is one move, and so white tries to stop that, and then black stops white from castling. And this is a game with two very strong players. Luther was black. Luther is a famous player of the French, grandmaster. And he's going to play bishop here next and just dominate those light squares. So this is a very, very bad, this is a terrible position for white. Just to show you that as an example. Obviously not forced, but just to show you a3 a little bit. That's this move a3. In this game, white just develops, black pins. Now that's funny, bishops before knights in a way, but he's trying to get, again, just more control over, neutralize these knights in order to get a positional advantage in the center. And now you don't have to play bishop g4 at all, of course. This game we had, here again, same themes, same ideas, winning these light squares. But white has the two bishops, so it's sort of a balance here. If black takes here, then again, knight takes, there's this issue of attacking that pawn. White has to play kind of slowly, And even this move is kind of awkward check because there's no way to play bishop e3, and bishop e2 allows these doubled pawns. And queen e2 allows these doubled pawns too. So that's just a typical way where black's lead in development is a bit of a problem for white. So the c takes d is not a typical move. Now you could play bishop there, but then we've got our same problem of taking with tempo. And I can show you some examples of that, but it's not a very good move. So the move he makes is probably a little better here. And now if he takes now, of course, there's this extra double threat of the queen's there and the bishop's there, threatening to double those pawns. So white in this case plays simply bishop e2, and black gets rid of that bishop. And actually queen d7 is probably a little more accurate, but I won't go into that. And now black goes after those light squares, and that's the theme I wanted to show you, is light square theme. This has the idea of drawing the bishop away from that square. That's a great outpost. And so what's happening here is white has two bishops, which is an advantage, but black has a lead in development and a color complex control over the light squares. I'd actually rather be black here. It's pretty close. It's not that bad, but it's can be a little easier for black to play, I think. I'll show you why in a second. So he takes. I don't know if there's any option there. Not a serious option. Usually c5 is too slow. First of all, it wastes a tempo, but secondly, it can be hit by that. And then if white has to take, then there's either an open file against a backward pawn supporting an outpost, or an open file that way against a backward pawn. So c5 tends to be too slow. But the pawn is threatened, so he takes. And again, now black's got more pieces out than white. It's that simple, really. So white makes that move. Black comes into the center, and it's has really good control over the center. Black was going to play knight c4 anyway, I think is what would happen. And the plan is to play b5. The other way to do this, by the way, since rook b5 was threatened, is maybe play here first and keep that knight on b3 and c4. So just for example, just like that. Really grip on those light squares. You'll find this is see how passive those bishops are? You'll find this is very easy to play. It may even be objectively only equal, but I think it's a little better for black. It's if white attacks that pawn, you just move it. Get more light square control. I've won games like this. I guess that's why I'm confident about black's chances here. And two bishops are wonderful, but in this case, black's got a lot going for him. Okay, so let me see. What was that about? Oh, the exchange French was c4. Well, maybe that covers that. Maybe that's good enough for at least a starter. And then next time or this time, I have also prepared a game with knight f3 and c4. So we could get to that if we don't have more questions. So maybe the first thing to find out is if we have more questions. Okay, versus French, asymmetry can be achieved if c3, knight c6, or if knight c3, c6. That's true. When he says playing slowly, is that my statement? Okay, we're going to go to d4, bishop g5 in a second. But right now, okay, so what Eric is saying, this is Eric Schiller, by the way, a kind of a celebrity, so that's going to be very interesting. What Eric is basically saying is that in the French defense, you can always get some asymmetry if you want to, because if they play a move like knight c3 at some point, you can play c6. And if they play a move like c3, you can go knight c6. I believe that's what he's saying. Let me check that again. Yeah, so that by itself is asymmetrical. And you might say, isn't c3 a better move than knight c6, because knight c6 is sort of biting on granite, but knight c6 prepares really quick development, maybe to g4, and castling queenside sometimes, followed by throwing all your pawns forward. So knight c6 represents probably some kind of kingside attack against, and well, let's just look at it. Let's say, probably wouldn't play knight c6 immediately, probably play something like this, and let's just fake it here, make some moves, maybe here. Something like this, check here, I don't know. I'm sort of making this up. But that kind of thing, what black wants to castle queenside and go like this is the idea. But he's also saying that in reverse, you can play against knight c3. Now, see, against knight c3, I tend to recommend going into a winnower with this move. But you can just play c6, and in this case, you're really you're going to be careful so as not to allow white that sort of stereotyped attack, and you're probably just going to play very carefully as black, very slowly and unambitiously. But white has many ways to approach this position too, so it's fun also. It's fun to play this too. You start with this, and then you worry about maybe playing bishop g5 later, and you worry about where to put the knight first. And you might go queenside. Sometimes you go queenside in these positions. That's white. So good comment, obviously. Recent book on d45 with bishop f5 comment. Yeah, I saw that book. It's not an easy system to get around. It's called the Baltic defense. Although I think he was giving bishop f5 against sort of everything, wasn't he? I think he was giving bishop f5 almost no matter what you play. But this right here is the Baltic. You can confirm, Eric, if that's what we were talking about. Eric and I, wrote a book where we talked about how to meet this, and there are many ways to meet this. It used to be that I really liked the variation with queen b3, even right now, an early queen b3, just trying to bowl black over. And you can play that way, but you can also just play very safely and get your pieces out. One of the ideas, by the way, is that looks good, doesn't it? Because you get knight c3 in, but he takes here first. And this is a fun line, I think, for white to play too, though, by the way. I think this position is actually quite a lot of fun for white. And there's various ways to do it. You can look this up, or I can show you one of them. There are gambits, for one thing, where you put the queen. For example, let me see what the line is that I would mention here. Okay, one way to play this. I know the queen. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, the main line, actually, although I think it's fine to take, actually, but the main line here is not to take back. It's to play queen check first. Sorry. And that's considered to give white some advantage. Because if you play here, it's hard to get this pawn back. And white has two bishops. White can win a lot of endgames with those two bishops. But if you play here, then now there's two ways to play it. One is you can play for an endgame, like that, and let black take this, and then it turns out white's better in this endgame, as you can imagine, because you have the two bishops. So that's one way to play it. And then the other way to play it is if you play a move like this, you just simply take back, and you still have two bishops, and you have the idea of getting a big center going. So it's more complicated than that, but that's a good approach. And then there are other ways to play this too. Probably that's the easiest, is queen a4 check. I don't remember what he gives. He gives, maybe Eric knows what he gives in this line. Just generally, I've always liked this line for white, but I'm trying to remember what he does to defend this position. Black's idea, by the way, is just to get the bishop in front of the pawn chain and play a queen's gambit. Do something like this, and get the pieces out and castle, and not have that bad bishop that you always see in a queen's gambit. But he usually can't really achieve that. I've never been that impressed with this whole variation. Somebody recently was suggesting this line. I think there's a whole book or half of a book on that line, by the way. so that's a funny idea. That I still think white gets a small advantage, but someone was trying to defend that. Good question. Okay, now we have this bishop g5 thing. I don't know if we talked about this before. Quite a few people have been interested in this variation with bishop g5. That's a very popular line for white. I think we talked about briefly. It's been mentioned a couple times on this show already. This one's a little different. He's saying after d6, knight c3 c6. No, I'm sorry, that's not, no. Knight c3 h6. Okay. I don't know this line offhand. I will look it up and we can talk about it next week, but in the meantime, let's just see if we can fake it a little bit. Okay, so the idea is the king has an escape score now, so if you start making moves like e4, you're just going to, well, you can't play that anyway. What am I saying? Sorry. If you start playing into those main ideas like this, I guess, although you still have this, threatening, no, I guess that's too good for black. I guess the d7 square is pretty good. It's funny, you seem to get some compensation, but I guess probably not enough. Yeah, this just isn't good enough. Okay, so I'm just going to have to work this out on the fly a little bit. So basically what that means is that bishop h4 is just bad. Maybe e4 would be slightly better than what we just looked at, but not much better, I don't think. Let's just see. Okay, hang on. A little patience here. Yeah, I don't believe this. I think black's fine here. Okay, so so that's the idea of h6, which means we can't play any of the usual tricks, so we're just going to have to retreat. Well, black's got a lot of weaknesses, so retreating may not be such a bad idea. Okay, so let's say we just go here. Now remember, there's things like h4, h5, and knight h3, f4 as ideas here. Right now, if it was white's move, I'd just play e4. So I assume knight f6 happens. You can help me, by the way, the person who asked this. This was Renato. Yeah, give me some help here. I tend to think when black makes that many weaknesses, white should be fairly happy. We could play e4 anyway, I suppose. And the idea would be that if he takes it, he's losing an awful lot of time. You could even think about taking this right away because you've got check, check, takes, right? A lot of big weaknesses here. I don't really like this unless black can win material. Don't see it. I don't see black winning material there. So maybe just e4 here. Okay, if that's true, then maybe knight f6 isn't right. You might as well, you give me a little hand here and tell me what's going on if you happen to know, because I feel like I'm making a fool of myself a little bit. But I would say after h6, you just retreat the bishop, you're threatening e4, and it's really up to black to do something. e5 seems very shaky because you aren't developing your pieces, and I still have queen a h5 check. Let's take a look at that. Maybe e5 is a better move. But it's a very loose position. Maybe bishop c4. Or e takes f5. Or knight here attacking the center because that also attacks here. He really can't give you e5, can he? Okay, I'm starting to like white. Better development. You can always, if you have to, just play there, defending those light squares, and get a big lead in development. Also knight h4 at some point, but obviously it's not yet because you want to get developed first. Not a great answer maybe, but I guess my instinct would be bishop d2. Maybe you know some more theory. Maybe it is possible to play this, and the books know some reason why. But I don't want to lose a piece that way, and not when the king has an escape square. I'm not thrilled with that. So you might want to comment on that. That would be fun to see what you think of that line, Renato. What you feel like should happen. But I like the bishop d2 idea. Just offhand. Let me see what else we have here. Okay, nothing else on the chat. Let me just continue then. One thing I promised to talk about, well, I have this knight f3. I'll do that next time, maybe in the French exchange. So we've covered bishop d3 and c4. Next time we'll cover knight f3. People keep asking about favorite books, and I keep asking you about your favorite books. I got one question about Yusupov's training series, and what I thought of it. And the problem with that is that I haven't really read that series. I do have it, and I've glanced at it, but I wouldn't be fair to talk about it. I'm really not qualified to judge. But I do think with training books, it's most important that you enjoy reading them and using them than it is that whether it's sort of objectively some brilliant technique for teaching. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're probably going to stop. And if you stop, any study you do, even if it's a bad book, is better than not studying enough. So the main thing is to stay, all study is useful. So the more study you do, the better, I guess is what I'm saying. The more you really work at what you're looking at and think about, the more you're going to learn. Even if it's a book that everybody else thinks is a bad book, it may not really matter that much in terms of training books. So as far as I can make out, Yusupov books, they seem pretty popular. They look good to me. And the other thing, of course, is he is a tremendously strong grandmaster. Made the candidates and lost to Karpov, and even that was a difficult match. So you're talking about a tremendously strong player who does have a teaching school in Germany. So he's obviously thought about teaching. So it's hard to believe you can go wrong with that, especially if you're already enjoying them. If you're looking at them and playing them and already enjoying them, I'd say go ahead and use them. I keep promising to talk about my favorite books, and people have been asking about middle game books. So I thought I'd mention old ones and new ones, just a few. And the classic middle game text is Oiva and Kramer. That goes way back. And it's called The Middle Game. It's 2 volumes. And it's still very relevant. It's got a lot of the great basic kinds of structures and positions. The first volume is on positional play, and the second one is on dynamic play, basically, and maybe some other aspects of chess. And some of the positions are a little out of date. People would say different things about it, but I don't think that really matters. I think it holds up really well. And the other older book that I've always liked, and I'm not original with this, but is My System. Nimzowitsch is My System. It's such a fun book to read. He's such a funny writer, and it's just brilliant. And the nice thing is that you'll see how openly and creatively chess can be played, that it's not all just stereotyped positional ideas, that there are ideas that you don't run into, probably won't run into early on when you're first learning chess, or even much later maybe. You know, it's some people kind of think of Nimzowitsch as being a kind of little loosey-goosey, and He's gotten some sort of criticism from some players, but great players. Petrosian, just loved. That's what he grew up with, Nimzowicz's books, and oddly enough, Karpov too. Even though he started out as sort of an attacking player, used Nimzowitsch a lot, and you'll find it's just it's fun and it teaches you tons. I mean, if there was ever a must-read book, I was asked about must-read books, and I don't think there really are any, but I think that's one you should read. That's a should-read book. And for modern books that cover the middle game, I think there are no more encyclopedias like Oyvind Kramer or Pachman or anything like that. But there's some books, a few recent books I thought I'd mention that are really great. I like John Nunn's Understanding Chess Middle Games, I think is what it's called. And it's from Gambit. It's 2011. I just checked that to see. It's just a terrific book. It has so many different kinds of positions. It's very instructive. It's got typical tactics and defensive ideas in all these middle games positions, as well as the normal positional ideas. So there are 100 of these themes that he talks about, middle game themes, and I think there's 2 examples of each, maybe sometimes 3, I'm not sure, but a lot of explanatory notes. So John Nunn's Understanding Chess Middle Games. Another book that's recently about the middle game, but about thinking and how to think, is Boris Gelfand's Positional Decision Making. This just came out as Quality Chess this year. Every time I glance at it, it just seems to have something a really nice quality to it. One of the very good quality chess book. And Boris Gelfand, of course, is one of the world's leading players, has been for years and years, and played for the World Championship. And another fun book, I'm just talking about recent books now, I don't know why, I'm sort of, just because those are the ones I'm looking at for possible reviews, is this book, Techniques of Positional Play. It's by Valery Bronznik and Anatoly Terekin. It's from New in Chess. It's 2013, published by New in Chess, 2013. It's really fun. It's got greatly instructive things. It's organized around skills that you might have. So there's 45 skills that you can use. That's just a technique. It doesn't matter that much. The main thing is there's plenty of great examples, and there's also training exercises, which a lot of people like. There's, I think, 40 training exercises, so people like that. So that's a start on middle game books. And of course, you can always use my middle game books, my Secrets of Modern Chess Strategy and Chess Strategy in Action. Secrets of Modern Chess Strategy is way back in 1998. And Chess Strategy in Action was a few years later, early 2000s. And so I obviously I recommend those books because I wrote them myself. But people haven't always read them recently. But they have the Secrets of Modern Chess Strategy deals with mainly positional themes, but the difference is it's old and it's sort of historical. It shows what those themes were like in the old days and how things have changed, how modern theory has changed and perspective has changed. So I hope it makes good reading. And then Chess Strategy in Action continues that with more things about how things have changed in modern play, but also adds a lot of illustrative games. So you can consider those. But at least that gives you a start for middle games. And we'll do other books next time, maybe endgames. We'll talk about endgame books, but we'll talk about something next time. And send me your favorite books and the things that you like best. Eric Schiller also likes Yusupov's books, so we've got a couple of things. Wow. Okay, we know E4 versus Knight F6. Knight BD2. Which line are we talking about, folks? Are we talking about that Dutch line again? Are we talking about this line again? The one where I was playing Bishop D2? Hang on. Knight BD2, Knight F6, E4 takes Knight F4, Bishop F5. Maybe you can tell me on the chat which exact line we're talking about here. Because Knight BD2 isn't even in on that Dutch line, so it must be something else. Any ideas? Somebody tell me what this comment is about. E4 versus Knight F6. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm not getting any clue here about what's going on. So if you guys get a chance, give me a chat about what Renato, which order you're talking about with Knight BD2, in which line. That would be useful. Okay, so what else do we have here? Let me continue here. That's okay. I have an interesting thing about opening books. This is also a new question. Many opening books de-emphasize the role of memorization in opening study, pointing out quite correctly, in my opinion, that what's important is understanding the ideas behind the openings. Nonetheless, it's totally unrealistic to expect players not to memorize any moves. For example, can you imagine a 1500 plus rated player in a tournament game trying to figure out whether they can get away with d takes c3 after e4, c5, d4, c3. Okay, let me show you that. Saying trying to get away with just using general ideas in a position like this, a Morra Gambit. That's called a Morra Gambit. So without memorizing anything. And he's saying that their flag would fall before move 5. Well, maybe, but I get the idea, and that's actually true. So it says, instead, what I would like to see is an opening book that recognizes some limited memorization is necessary and lays out specifically what players, depending on their strength, need to memorize in order to avoid falling into bad positions. And one reason I am giving that question is because I think it's a great idea. I think you're just right. He says, I think that such a book might actually reduce players' tendencies to memorize long variations without really understanding the position at the end of the variation, since they've already been told what to memorize. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't see that much problem with people memorizing long variations. I think they tend to pick up the ideas as they memorize. It sounds wrong. It sounds like rote memorization can't possibly be good. You know, that there's that whole stereotype about that you mentioned about, well, if you're just memorizing moves without ideas, you know, something's wrong. And of course, you can't not understand the ideas at all. But what I've found with students and things is that to the extent that they're memorizing moves, they're usually picking up the ideas because you're looking at examples, you're looking at, and hopefully, here's another way to study. Go ahead and memorize a line, but while you're memorizing, ask, well, why didn't my opponent do something else? Or why didn't white do something else? Why didn't black do something else? So on your way through the variation, you're asking yourself questions. Like, for example, okay, so we're doing this one maybe, the Morra, and black plays here, and the first thing you might ask is, well, why didn't black attack this or something? And then you might find out as time goes on that you're probably going to guess that it's probably that. And then you're going to maybe look at positions like that and think about them. And of course, that's a famous C3 Sicilian position. And you might ask, well, why doesn't he just defend that? Maybe just, you know, something like this. And then you go, well, it's a little hard to attack the center now for black. And of course, you can play this position, but that's neither here nor there. You just have to ask yourself questions as you go along. And then on the next move, you know, white takes, and you might ask, well, what else could white do? Why can't white play a Danish gambit like that, a Danish gambit kind of position? And then what about this position? What's happening here? And think about that. Think, how would I defend this? I've got two center pawns. Can I just sort of block those bishops? That kind of thing. So memorizing's okay, and then you just keep going through the book and look at what's actually suggested, but just make sure you keep asking yourself questions about why is someone playing what they're playing. And why, you know, why not some other defense? For example, here black usually plays either here, or maybe g6 is played sometimes. And but you can ask yourself what's wrong with that, and then think, well, is that really a good move? And try to defend black for a while. And then after a while, you might realize, or might think to yourself, yeah, this is actually a pretty good move. I better not risk that. Or that's what I'm going to do if I'm white. Like what happens if black plays x, y, or z? Just figure out what white's structure is. And as you memorize examples, you're going to see that white very boringly tends to play the move bishop c4, queen e2, castles, rook d1. It's really awful. How often those moves are, how stereotyped white's play tends to be in the Morra. Not always, but mostly. So our Tim Online, yeah, there we go. Eric points out that in our book we talk about an anti-Morra thing for black that they can play, and it's actually kind of cute. It's playing this very strange move before you move either one of the knights. It's kind of a neat line. You can look it up. It's in our old books, but it's also in our most recent book, which is called Taming the Wild Chess Openings, that came out last year. And we have a fair amount. And this it turns out, has been mentioned in a book, but basically is almost ignored by most Morra Gambit books, including the most popular recent ones. So that makes it a good thing because it's slightly unknown. And I think the reason for that is because it looks like at first sight it just looks, oh wow, we can go like this and win all the dark squares, and how can this is too committal. But it turns out in this position, for example, you even have a couple choices, but probably the most obvious one is just go there, stopping knight e4. And if he takes going here, and it's true that he can go into some kind of endgame, but it's not very impressive. And white can of course just develop, but that gives you a lot of extra options having that bishop out there, which is kind of nice. So one thing you can do is set up a structure with e6, knight e7, and maybe even e5. It's a very solid structure. Okay, so yeah, good point about the Morra. Some lines need memorization, very good point. We have the b4 versus the King's Indian. If you're going to go into the main line of the King's Indian, you have to memorize tons anyway. It's white and black. So maybe that's not the best example, Eric, because after all, if you're playing this far into the game, you better be a pretty good memorizer. It's white or black, right? You're going to have to know a ton of stuff because of all the various options black has. Well, and white has. White has all kinds of things where he plays this first, or the Averbach, or bishop e3 before knight f3, or after knight f3, or h3, or blah blah blah. And black too has to really know a lot. Eric's talking about this line. And of course here there's tons of ideas too. And there's always knight a6, which is important. There's also bishop g4 here, which is probably a little underrated actually. There's all kinds of things. And here white has to know this kind of thing. But anyway, Eric's talking about this line. He's talking about the bayonet, Kramnik's favorite, which has been taken up by just about everybody, and it's a very dangerous line, and as Eric knows, a really good one. He's played it himself as white successfully. At least I think he's talking about that. But yeah, of course you'd have to memorize a load here, but that's because you're playing a main line, so both sides need to memorize a lot to play variations like this. But you learn so much memorizing stuff like this. It doesn't matter as long as you slow down and kind of realize why you're doing things and kind of ask yourself, why didn't I do something else? That's the key. I mean, just for example, let's see if we can do that. Let's say white plays here and black plays here. And of course, you have to know about this. So you probably would ask yourself that question, why am I not just losing a pawn? And white might have to ask, why am I not just taking it? But boy, black has so many options here. But once you do get to a position like this, I mean, you might ask for, why isn't black just going here so that he can, back here, so that he can play like this and a5 and then put a knight on the standard blockading square? You want to kind of question yourself about that. Why is this different from so many positions where black plays this exact plan? And it turns out it's not really very good here, but you need to kind of ask yourself those questions rather than just throwing the knight onto this square without thinking about it. Great question. So basically, I agree with the questioner about it'd be really nice if books specified this is what you need to memorize and this is what you don't. I like that. I like it very much. And but I also would like to say that memorizing it is probably a little underrated too, because it just making the moves and showing them and doing them again and again and playing them so that you have to think about them while you're playing them, and then memorizing them is very useful. You'll find you'll get the ideas after a while just from examples. Of course, it's better if you can kind of somehow understand the ideas right off, but ideas aren't as powerful as moves in many ways because they're so vague. Every position is so flexible that if you just say, here's the idea, you're missing many other ideas in any given position. So it's not enough to just say, this is the idea of this move. It doesn't, somehow that just doesn't suffice. You have to play a bunch of moves and practice them and think about them and play them again and again before you really catch on to what's going on. Okay. Okay, so we got this back about the Staunton thing. Let me do that. This is part of the chat. Okay, d6, knight c3, h6. Oh, I see. You're saying against my bishop d2. You have an idea. Okay, here, e4, I guess. You don't really have to play e4, but I like the idea. It looks offhand like a really nice one. e4, fe, knight e, bishop f5. I see. Okay, yeah, but look at these squares. I bet white's doing pretty well, or knight g3 probably, or even takes. I don't know. They both look really good, knight g3 and takes. I'd have to think about it for a while. Well, what happens if you take? I don't know. I guess you probably, you're going to take back this way, obviously. You're going to lose a piece to queen h5 check. So this position, can't we be happy for white would be my question. I'd like to just do that and go queenside, but I guess maybe the ending's not that obvious. Queen f3 is interesting because the bishop c2 looks too risky. I mean, I even wonder, I don't know, there's so many things here. There's this with the idea of knight h4. Can't be that bad, can it? Actually, that looks like a pretty good move. I just can't believe this is good. Maybe it's just intuitive, but I just don't believe this. It's not like black has a huge lead in development to make up for all these weaknesses. You could also get the bishop out first, I suppose, and then play queen e2 check. No, that's crazy. Sorry. I don't like that at all. The other thing you can do is go crazy, play a move like this, and just say, look, are you really going to be able to defend all these things? I think the best of all, the best of the ones I mentioned is just knight f3. You can play bishop d3 later if you want to get fancy. And he also has to be a little careful about this kind of idea with huge light square control. So what do you think of that? Now you might want to give some moves here, I'm not sure. Knight a6 really grew a lot. Yeah, I've played it myself actually. He's talking about the King's Indian again, Eric is. E4, E5, Komodo. Oh, okay, so he's putting it on the, this is good. Because I just made that up actually, that bishop d2 thing. So now I have to play against the computer. I'll probably get slaughtered. Was it E4? Okay, so it's E4 now. E5. Okay, well, yeah. But I mean, I have a basic lead in development here, right? Just takes a knight f3. If I can get this bishop c4 moving, I'm going to be very, very happy. How about takes a knight f3 just to get a tempo on that guy? I don't think you can give that up. Yeah, hard to say. Black could get away with almost anything in chess. But we have knight h4 ideas, and we have bishop c4, bishop b5 check ideas, and we're going to get castled pretty quickly. I'm not happy here. It's probably okay, but I'm not thrilled. I don't know what you think about that, Eric, but I just, my instincts are telling me that there's issues here. So I don't know. Be put on the spot here as usual. I'll take a quick look at it next week, but I think that last position is going to be better for white. I just feel like it's just not quite working for black. The thing that might work for black is if you start taking too many things and get his pieces out too quickly. Then even if you isolate a pawn, it's not going to be easy. But I think if you just play it safe, like I say, just here, should be okay. Because I can't believe taking here can possibly work with all those light. Well, we can check it just to be sure, but now we're on that square. This is an idea. That's a huge idea there. So even knight takes e4 might be an idea. So this is pretty pathetic. But of course, black wouldn't play that way. He'd play something safer. Okay, good questions here. What else do we have? Okay, we're doing what now? Are there any other questions on the chat? I could go back to I didn't actually mention all the middle game books. We could go back to that, or we could go back to the Exchange French. I didn't do that one. I'm not getting as many questions as usual. Looks messy, but it looks good for white, to me. All right, anything else? Let me see. Oh, there are some questions that I skipped up here. My fault. We have knight c6, e6, h6. Instead of knight c6, e6 with bishop c5. Yeah, that's just what I mentioned. Your thoughts on the Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack? We've talked a little about the Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack. Actually, there's two moves we've talked about. One is just playing 1b3 straight away, which is just this move, and all the entertaining things that can happen after that. The Nimzowitsch-Larsen attack, as I remember right, starts with this first, because Nimzowitsch played that way. He played with knight f3. And of course there's the famous Fischer thing that you got to be a little careful of. If you play bishop b2 now, this is already a good move for black. That's sort of hard to believe at first, but the more you look at it, the more it seems to work out pretty nicely for him. And part of the reason for that is if you just play normal moves that you make, say, in an English defense kind of position, we've looked at those, you don't have an f4 break. And the other reason is that if you play a natural move like this to stop e5, then after he takes, you're going to get e5 with tempo no matter what white plays here. So even though white has a whole bunch of pieces out, he's losing a lot of time. He's losing the center is what really is the problem. So that's the idea. Now white doesn't have to do that, of course. White can play, after this, white can always just play, for example, here, and then even knight c3 ideas after check. I mean, it's complicated. It's not that easy, but it's still a problem. It's still an issue. So that's what Fischer played against Petrosian, if I remember right. So the way to avoid that is to play e3 first, if you want to. You can do that. And then you have a sort of a normal Queen's Indian, Bogo Indian kind of position. And now f3, you don't have to play bishop b2, which kind of runs into a granite wall here. You can play other moves like bishop b5 check, for example. And you don't have to commit the bishop. The bishop might even go here in some lines. So that's kind of the idea. You can play a Benoni-like position with c5 too. c4, excuse me. So but it's still a good move. Okay, but what am I doing? I'm talking about the attack in general. Yeah, so here what I do is I wouldn't even move the bishop. I would just play e3 first, is the idea. And this is called the Nimzowitsch-Larsen. The one problem with an opening like this is that black can play very conservatively, and then all of a sudden you don't get any. You're white, and you won't get any advantage. What you'd like is for black to commit a lot, like get a big center, and commit to you attacking his center. But for one thing, even right now, black can just play very solidly. For example, just to show you something, black could play this move, for example, just a London system setup, or even maybe this move, because knight e5, you just come back. I think it's a fine opening. It gets pieces out, it's logical, it's positionally solid, it doesn't create weaknesses. I think it's absolutely fine. I think your odds of getting an advantage against a halfway decent player are kind of low. That's the only problem. That's why you don't see it, I think, more often, because black can just play very slowly. You also can transpose. For example, if you play, sometimes you'll get sort of a ready-like system like that. You might end up getting one of these kinds of positions, and then white might double fianchetto, or white can play this kind of thing. And these things are quite playable and can be a lot of fun. I used to play the ready with this, although I waited with bishop b2. I delayed because otherwise d4 can be good sometimes. But I guess that's what I'd say about it. It's solid, it's fine, you can't lose, but if black plays solidly, you don't have anything special. Thank you, Anthony. It's a lot of fun. Okay, Carlson, World Championship prediction. Yeah. I don't see what Karyakin has for him. Yeah, I think yeah, going out a limb, that's right. So, and d4 leads to after e3 to Rubinstein Kali. Yeah, you can get into what Zucator Kali, I guess I think of it as, depending what black's doing, of course. But what Eric is saying here is that if you play a regular Kali system, let's say black plays slowly, for example, just plays very slow moves, and white plays, for example, like this and this, then this position here, for example, is called a Zucator Kali Zucator system, and Eric's written a lot about this. With d4, okay. Without d4, I guess it might not be specifically a Kali. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is called either the Rubinstein Kali or the Zucator Kali. I always thought it was the Zucator once you played here and here. Speaking of Yusupov, who we mentioned earlier, he used to play this system as white. He liked to play b3 and Kali systems. So the Kali proper, I guess you guys pretty much know. We talked about the Kali and how to meet it a couple weeks ago, actually. And that's more like, well, I don't know about the move order, but that's if you play e3 early, and then you almost always play c3 next, soon. I mean, just for example, well, it just depends what he does, but for example, here's a Kali. Play here, bishop somewhere, maybe d3 here and here. And then sometimes you play here and to aim for that. Actually, it's probably more common order. I'm being kind of silly here. Let me think about the typical Kali move order. Typical Kali move order would be to play something like this, and then after that to play something like this. It's a Slav reversed, this kind of semi-Slav reversed position like that. That's the Kali, and we've talked quite a bit about those kinds of positions, several times actually. Okay, so moving on. We have more chat stuff here. I think being an hour late didn't help today. I think starting an hour late, we didn't get as many chatters in. So because that's true, and since we actually have plenty of time left, or do we? Oh no, we don't. We've gone way past. So my listeners must be going crazy here. Okay, folks, we've gone past our limit here. Oh, I didn't even realize, way past. But it's fun to get one long show in again. And next week I'll be more disciplined, and we'll start over. So send me your things. AskIamWatson@chessclub.com. Thank you everybody for listening, and I'll see you next week.